Hey, welcome back to this second hour of Money Monday edition of Liquid Lunch on Newsmax TV. I'm John TABACCO. We're coming to you today as we do every day, Monday to Friday, noon to 2 Eastern. Today we're in the Question Tequila Studios in downtown Manhattan. And on Money Monday, we bring you the money guests. We just had Dr. Patrick Byrne, who's involved in a number of scandals. And joining us to kick off hour two in the leadoff spot, it's David Pietrusza. He is the author of Rothstein, the true story of the fixing of a World Series game with the Black Sox.
That's right.
David, thanks for joining us.
Great
on
to be
Liquid
here.
Lunch. You could write about it, talk about it, and what drives you to dig down into baseball and organized crime?
I actually wanted to do a book on New York City in the 1920s, and I wasn't sure who would allow me to do that at that time. And also, this guy turned out to be involved in everything. It wasn't just the fixing of the series. It was Wall Street, the bucket shops.
So
it was Tammany Hall,
famed gangster
Arnold Rothstein, and we're talking. He even bankrolls Broadway shows, labor racketeering, bootlegging. There's going to be drug running in the later part of the 1920s, and gambling, of course. He's a gambler. He's a moneylender. He's a loan shark. He's involved in fixing races and World Series and the owning casinos in Saratoga. So he's involved in just about everything that can be nefarious, and even some things that aren't nefarious. He's considered to be, you know, he pretends to be a legitimate businessman. But say, for example, he takes out a loan. You take out a loan with him, rather. You also take out an insurance policy with his firm. And guess who the beneficiary is?
Him.
And as he says, God help you if you don't pay.
That's right. So when I hear about this guy, Arnold Rothstein, and I know some of the history, but not nearly as much as you, but you say he was into bootlegging.
Right?
You say he was into drugs. You say he was into gambling, and he was into loan sharking.
Yes.
Sounds like he was a forerunner, because most of those things are pretty much legal these days.
well, we're talking about baseball and all that. Now baseball in sports gambling. And there was sports gambling before the fixing of the World Series. I mean, certainly in boxing and things like that, but not on baseball. And now we're coming full circle to that. And we're going to find out, you know, exactly what dangers exist when you mix athletes and gamblers.
Got it.
So this is the 100th anniversary of the season of the 1919 Black Sox.
Right.
They played the Cincinnati Reds in the World Series. That
Right.
had a 9-game series. Explain to people that maybe don't follow baseball exactly what happened in a nutshell. And I want to ask you a couple of things with respect to how it's affected the game that we know today.
In a nutshell, 8 men out are banished from baseball because of their part, one way or another, in fixing that World Series. 7 of them take money. An 8th guy sits in on the meetings. They're all out of baseball. Some of them were legitimate stars. Eddie Seacott was a tremendous fellow, a pitcher who had really invented or perfected the knuckleball. Shoeless Joe Jackson had the 3rd highest batting average in all baseball. And there's been a lot of controversy ever since. Should you put Jackson back in baseball and posthumously allow him into the Hall of Fame? The fellow who didn't take the money but sat in on the meetings, Buck Weaver, people say, well, he was banished unfairly. But in fact, the decision of Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis, his first one as commissioner, to banish Weaver is the most important decision he makes, or maybe any other commissioner, because it says that the honest players are now going to have to rat on their dishonest teammates. And that is what short circuits all the fixing that had been going on before, and there was a ton of it. There were other World Series that were rumored to have been fixed. There were games that were rumored to be fixed in the 1920 series, and that comes to an end.
So there's no doubt at all that, 1, these men took money, and 2, that they actually did fix the World Series.
Many of them admitted to it. 3 of them admitted to it in a grand jury. Another fellow admitted to it in newspaper interviews. So we know the money was passed by from 2 sets of gamblers, both of whom were bankrolled by Arnold Rothstein to fix that World Series. Although afterwards they say, well, we took the money, but we really didn't do anything wrong. We didn't do anything to fix the series, which is like, I don't think so.
Now, we've all seen, well, many of us have seen Field of Dreams. We've also seen the movie 8 Men Out, which is all about the Black Sox scandal. And in that film, they portray the White Sox owner, Charlie Comiskey, as sort of an ogre, a cheap that wouldn't give you ice in the winter. In fact, here's a clip from 8 Men Out. People know about 8 Men Out. But in reality, was Charlie Comiskey this cheap, steel-spined ogre that he's portrayed to be in the movie?
Oh, it's the myth of the big bad capitalist, the exploitator of labor. And really, the White Sox in 1919 end that season with the highest payroll in the American League. Shoeless Joe Jackson is the highest paid left fielder, behind Babe Ruth. And Eddie Seacott, who is the main pitcher fixer, is the second highest paid pitcher behind Walter Johnson, the big train, one of the greatest pitchers ever. So that it's not true at all. There are bonuses paid by Comiskey. They say he stiffed Seacott, Eddie Seacott, on a promise bonus if he won 30 games. That is absolute baloney. So many of the myths, these are myths about the World Series of 1919, and it's about time that they were debunked. And now we have the evidence in the last 20 years.
Was there anybody that was discernibly took the money but didn't do anything to throw the game?
Well, Shoeless Joe Jackson says he did not. He hit .375 in the series, had the series only home run, had 12 hits. So he says, hey, look at what he did. In that movie, Field of Dreams, Kevin Costner says, my father told me that Shoeless Joe Jackson, his glove is where triples went to die. Well, the Cincinnati Reds in that series hit 3 triples to left field. Yeah. How often do you see that? And also the home run was, when one game was out of reach. The Sox were playing to win some of the games because the gamblers were double-crossing the players on payments, and then the players started to double-cross the gamblers. Everybody was double-crossing everyone else. So some of those games, the White Sox were playing to win. So it's all very convoluted. But the bottom line is Shoeless Joe Jackson took $5,000 from the gamblers. When he goes to Judge Commissioner Mountain Landis to be reinstated at one point, he says, and those crooks never even gave me the full amount they were supposed to. That's hardly reinstatement material.
Yeah, right.
So what kind of an impact did this have on baseball fandom at the time? We've all seen the images of the little boy running up to Shoeless Joe and say it ain't so, Joe, say it ain't so. Was that reality, or did fans shrug it off as another scandal and, all right, we've got nothing else to do, let's keep watching?
I think people were pretty shocked. Two things really kept baseball from going down the same route that boxing did, of like you can't trust it and eventually public faith erodes. And those two things are, one, Kennesaw Mountain Landis banning those 8 guys and making it clear that baseball was going to be a clean sport again. And the second thing is the advent of the lively ball era where they changed the baseball. It's wound tighter. Also, a player was killed by a pitch in 1920, hit in the head, and they ban a lot of these trick pitches. So the hitting goes up, and there's this guy named Babe Ruth who's going to be the big star. And, once your team gets into first place, you sort of forget the steroids. You forget all the scandals.
So 100 years later, why do you think this is still relevant to not just baseball fans, but Americans today?
It's relevant because the power of myth, and we want to believe the story in Field of Dreams, that maybe these guys were railroaded and justice can now be done, but justice was done. And also, what is the future of sports betting and all that? Can this happen again? And it could very well.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
Can't happen if you're a Met fan. Their World Series hopes seem to be diminishing by the day.
Certainly, but and it can't happen if you're in New York because FanDuel and DraftKings are only legal in New Jersey. So
it could never happen.
Apparently, gambling is legal in some states and still illegal in other states.
It's still not legal to take a bribe to throw a game, though.
No,
but putting the money under the table is can happen anywhere.
What were the other exploits of Rothstein that were really unique and people wouldn't know about?
Well, here's an amazing story. Before the fix happens, a few years before that, he's holding an illegal gambling game, and he hears a knock on the door, and he had just been robbed not long before by, you know, just other crooks. And he thinks the same thing is about to happen to him again, and he has a revolver, and he fires 3 shots through the door and hits 3 policemen. It's a raid, okay? Now, instead of being convicted of shooting 3 policemen, his connections are so big that he is not only not indicted, but one police officer who presses this case and wants some justice done, he's indicted. That's the kind of pull that Arnold Rothstein has with Tammany Hall in the 19 teens, and it's going to grow in 1920s New York. He's really connected to so many people. In terms of baseball, again, in his early career, he owned a pool hall in Herald Square in partnership with John J. McGraw, the famous manager, the immortal manager of the New York Giants. And he was connected to Horace Stoneham's father, who also owned the New York Giants, in terms of these bucket shops on Wall Street. So everything was connected with him.
I'm starting to like this guy Rothstein more and more.
You'll love the book.
Wait until you hear about how he met his untimely end. I think it's enough for a scared straight movie.
I'm going to hold up on that part, but
fair enough. But it's a great book. It's called Rothstein. David Pietrusza is a terrific writer. He's written a lot of books about presidential biographies that I've really enjoyed. And it's interesting to see the nexus between baseball and politics in some respects, or sports and politics in general. In some respects, things change a great deal over the years. In some respects, they don't.
Absolutely. David Pietrusza, I want to thank
Great to
you
meet
very
you.
much for joining us. Go out and get this book. It happened 100 years ago, but it could happen again today. And there's some great old New York and baseball lore in here that you should learn more about. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back with this Money Monday edition, hour 2 of Liquid Lunch right after this.